Okay, this is one of the more controversial topics when reviewing a game, and it's something no one really noticed. And that would be that playing a game upon its initial release and playing a game from like 5, 10, or even 20 years past its release will be two very different reviews. But as always, let me elaborate. Hello everyone, Alec Elger the SideQuest Gamer here, and after playing Mega Man 6 for gameplay footage for my last editorial video on the Red Ash Kickstarter, I had a lot of fun with it, and I looked up reviews of the game from its initial release, and while the reviews were somewhat positive, a lot of critics in 1993 universally said that it felt more of the same and didn't really add anything new to the table. Of course, that's just paraphrasing on my part, but still, this made me really think hard about a lot of games that got some initial negative fan reaction. For example, Zelda Majora's Mask. While well received by critics, the fans, however, upon its initial release, claimed that it was disappointing because it wasn't Ocarina of Time. Yet today, that's one of the most beloved Zelda games of all time. Another example would be Mega Man 5 through 8 as well as X6 and X8. Mega Man 5 and 6 were called more of the same because after the one Mega Man per year deal back then, I could kind of see that. I mean, honestly, Mega Man 5 and 6 are some of my favorite entries in the series, surprisingly. But back then, would you honestly pay another $50 for another Mega Man game upon initial release? I would be discouraged because $50 back then especially is a lot of money, and for at least 30 of those dollars, I hope they would change things up a little bit to have its own identity. Which is why Mega Man X6 and X8 were criticized. People were tired to pay like $50 to $60 for the same game that had only slight differences but nothing drastic in terms of improvements. That's why many people say the first Mega Man X is the best in the series. It was a refreshing take on the Mega Man franchise, but because X2 could only make slight improvements because Mega Man X was a near-perfect game, people ignored it and dismissed it as more of the same, despite the slight improvements and a few things that made it have its own identity. Mega Man X6 was hated because X5 was supposed to be Inafune's end to the X franchise, but Capcom had to milk it for more than it's worth. But the thing is, the game is functional, but it really didn't bring anything new to the table, therefore people hated it. But honestly, it's a well-programmed game in its own right. Sure, it's not the best, but it's still a well-programmed game, and Mega Man X8 was not hated, but often ignored because X7 was rightfully despised, in my opinion, because it was one of the worst transitions into 3D of all time, and I dare say one of the worst games of all time. But Mega Man X8 went back to its root and made some interesting new improvements. But no one really cared because no one was willing to give the X franchise a second chance because A, it either felt more of the same and stuff when renting it, or B, because Mega Man X7, there's just no redeeming for that, supposedly. It's sad, really, because it did make a few interesting additions, like I said, and it was a worthy conclusion to the X franchise, in my opinion, if it didn't end on a cliffhanger, but still, it's a good game in its own right. Now, this philosophy doesn't just apply to Mega Man. This applies to any game, really, but as the prices drop for digital re-releases or used copies, the more we're willing to give the game another look. A lot of people are starting to appreciate previously overlooked games, like I previously mentioned, Mega Man 5 and Mega Man 6, and even 7 and 8, because I don't think those did too well in the sales department. But anyways, because of the price drop, people are taking advantage of these low prices, and for $5 or $8 or even $10, we're willing to appreciate a game even if it only makes slight improvements. And that is one of the goals of my channel, to look at some of these games for what they really are. Not for how much content they offer for the $60 or $50 asking price, unless it's still too much to buy used and it didn't get a digital re-release. Sorry, but I am not paying $100 for a used Mega Man 7 game, and that game wasn't re-released digitally for the longest time, but thank goodness it got a Wii U re-release. But while some games get initially criticized for being more of the same, there are also other games that get just hate for being way too different from its predecessors, like Metroid Other M, for example. Yes, it's linear. Yes, it's not Metroid Prime or Super Metroid, but I've had way more fun with that game than I did with even Prime 2 or Prime 3, because it functioned well and it did what it did, well, not perfectly, but enough to be enjoyable. And since I got that game for like $7 used, I could enjoy the game as a game itself instead of its initial $60 asking price promising to be a successor to Metroid Prime 3. So in conclusion, initial reviews and retrospective reviews and public reaction of video game sequels will be different given a long-term period of time and a noticeable price drop. I almost never buy a game brand new and always wait for a Game of the Year edition to come out because of the lower price and it has all the DLC, but I did my DLC criticisms in previous editorials and even reviews. But remember, if there was a game you hated upon its initial release for being different or being more the same, I ask you to give it a second chance. You never know, because your taste in games and really anything will change over the years. Who knows? Maybe Mega Man 6 could be better than you remember. Maybe Zelda Majora's Mask is an excellent game for being extremely different than Zelda Ocarina of Time. Maybe Metroid Other M is one of the better Metroid games compared to like Prime 2 or Metroid Prime Hunters. If the price is low, give it a chance. If you haven't played it in years, just give it a chance. What could hurt? If you lose $7, oh well, it's $7. And that's really my 2 cents on the issue. Comment question: what is one game you hated or overlooked initially, but with a price drop, you actually enjoyed it for what it is? Please leave your answers in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome.